Cod Woman of the Year. So, I encourage all of you to continue to check the website. Next week, our talk on Thursday evening is on Chatham Kelp, and we do still have some seats available for that. And also encourage all of you to become a member. We have a lot of programs going on. Twice a month we have talks, and in addition to that we have a rowing program. We sail on our sailboat, the Sarah, during the summer weather. We have a lot of camp programs. If any of you have any of your children, grandchildren, I encourage you to look at all of the programs that we have available. So enjoy the evening, and let me present our speaker.
Hello, everybody. I just thought, just what happened last night, you know, in the middle of the night in Washington, I just felt we should have a moment of silence of so many people who lost their lives. What can you say? That was tough. We're all lucky we're here, aren't we? So this is a piece of art by I believe he was a Falmouth artist, and it's a showing of what can happen before a revolution or an uprising. And this was in Falmouth, and it was the British vessels bombarding or attempting to bombard the Falmouth residents who were there and kicking up a storm because they didn't like what was going on. So just thought that's a good way to start, and particularly now with the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution, get ready this year and next year. You're gonna be like, really, another event? You know? So, but that's coming up in 2026. One book I'm working on is with quite a variety of writers, of authors, and it's on Cape Cod's role in the American Revolution. And I think we're almost up to 200 pages now, so we'll see. But that should come out by July or August of this year. So, the Otis family. I am I'm actually from New York, don't tell anybody. But I live in West Barnstable. I have since 1978. I love that area. And I knew fairly early on, Barnstable Historical Society people joined us. I knew fairly early on that this was an interesting area, and the Otis family was fascinating. They haven't been in the public as much, or particularly Mercy has not been in the public eye as much as probably Jim. And so I'm going to, two people, one is the brother, James, or Jimmy, who was very much involved in the American Revolution. I feel like I want to tell you a few things, but I got to wait and do it then. And then the other person is Mercy Otis Warren. And again, I wonder if either of them had not been involved with the American Revolution, if we'd be sitting here today with this country. I mean, they were key in our getting our own, our really birth of the United States. So one, Otis, is credited with planting the seed of the American Revolution, and the other, oh, I'm supposed to do this, right? Let's see if I do this right. There we go. So this is a genealogy of Otises, and I'll tell you about all of them. I'm sure you can all read it very well. This was given to Barnstable Historical Society by a woman from Connecticut whose great uncle back in the early 1920s did a genealogy of the Otis family, and it's owned by Barnstable Historical Society. You can come look at it anytime you want. So one of the Otises, where did I get to? I have to warn you, and you can see maybe some of these, John Otis, John Otis, John Otis, and then there's a few James, but the names can get kind of confusing because they've chosen those two names over centuries. But we will try to get through that part quickly. The first John Otis I'll be talking about was born in Barnstable, Devonshire, England. And you might think I'm mispronouncing it because it's spelled Barnstable with a P, but they actually say it almost with a B, Barnstable. And I know 2 people who live there, so I'm pretty sure I'm accurate about that. So this John Otis sailed from the New World to Hingham in 1631. I don't have pictures of him, obviously. And that area is known still today in Hingham as Otis Hill. And there's his gravestone and his son's gravestone. Again, John and John. You know, there was a lot of repetition of names. So the second one, his son, was born in England in 1620, and he came over to the colonies with his parents. And that was, again, 1631. This is the John who was granted 50 acres in Barnstable in 1667 with his son. Do you know what his name was?
John.
Smart group.
Original.
And he would become the judge of probate for the Barnstable County and a colonel in the military. So John, number 3, had a son named James. And that one became the chief member of Barnstable's Court of Common Pleas at the courthouse in Barnstable Village, which is now Tales of Cape Cod, the building. Was in between there was the Third Baptist Church of Barnstable. And this gentleman, again, chief judge, but is that too much? Yeah, I'm all right, I can read. And isn't it better for you guys this way?
Yeah,
Okay.
that slides it a little better this way.
You all look younger too.
By all means, keep the lights down.
So you might have heard of him. Again, he was Chief Justice of the Court of Common Pleas at the Barnstable Village courthouse. Now, there are only 2 courthouses left that were in, well, thank you. I don't know how I do that. Yeah, that's okay. My husband, he's nice. So one thing that he was known for is reacting to a group on September 26, 1774, and the dates and times of this and the number of people is really varies. It's so hard with history. I always say history is always in the making. We're always getting a little closer to the truth, and then we find out something wasn't quite what we thought. So I have heard as few as several hundred people started in Sandwich. They also, some of them came from the marshy area, which is now Cape Cod Canal, our canal now. And I've heard also as many as 1,500 people came, and they assembled eventually after they marched from Sandwich to the town of Barnstable, village of Barnstable too, protesting new British rules of government. And they were planning to shut down the courthouse. So this man it's his job, so he was a little but the building still stands again. I think, yeah, there we go. Tales of Cape Cod. Again, that steeple is left over from the Baptist church times. So this gentleman had all these people around their militia. They were just on fire that they were tired of England controlling everything of theirs. And they wanted to shut this courthouse down. So finally, James Otis Sr., because there's going to be another one, he finally said, okay, I agree with you, and he shut down the Court of Common Pleas. So, I should say probably too that after the court was cut down, he walked across the street to the Crocker Tavern with everybody else. So, and I'll tell you more about that later. So he and his wife, Mary Allen, she doesn't look very happy, but she did have a tough life. She had 13 children, and only 7 of them survived. And 4 of the remaining children did have a role in the American Revolution. The oldest child was named James, of course, and the second one down was named Joseph.
Sticking with the Joseph.
James Jr. was an enthusiastic student. He got a classical education from his uncle, Reverend Jonathan Russell II, at the Meeting House in West Parish, which I'm sure you've all been to. There was a Harvard, and you'll see that his son went to Harvard, and there was also, I think, Yale by then, but not a lot of other higher level education places. So you you got your education very often from your church. So he went on to Harvard, graduated in 1743, and became a lawyer and chief prosecuting attorney of the, oh, I need to show him, see. There he is. So that's James Otis Jr. He was a prosecuting attorney of the Admiral Court of Boston. But he resigned that post when he decided to defend one of 63 merchants who were suing the king's government for unfair taxation. And I may as well mention it, well, yeah, I'll just finish this sentence, but they were suing the government, that means the king's government, for unfair taxation and the resulting use of writs of assistance. And writs of assistance were a law that allowed any officer of England, of, you know, people controlling us, to go into your home kind of as without search warrants and check things over. And one of the things that I described to people to explain it is they had the Stamp Act. And the Stamp Act at one time, this was a little after this time, but they would insist that everything that was paper had to have a stamp on it. So you had to buy a stamp for that money to go to England. And if you didn't, and someone barged into your house at 2 a.m, you could go to jail because you didn't have this. So that's how unfair things were. Let's see, I probably explained all of that. Yeah, and also things like your tea. If you bought tea that was not made in England, you had a problem. King George III. Oh, now there's James again. And here's King George III.
Right.
I just love him. He was coronated in 1760. The hearing was held in the old state house that James Otis was going to. This is now because of this case he took in February of 1761. So George was new on the job, but in England, of course. So when James took the floor, and there's James, this is a painting as you come into the our state house. It's up on a rounded, now Paul, is it the very first hallway that we go into? I haven't been there in a while.
It's the second hallway.
Second hallway, thank you. That's why I brought him. And that's him. He took the floor by the middle of the afternoon. There was a lot of people talking about what they cared about King George and the ruling and did not like. So when he took the floor, he talked for nearly 5 hours, about 4.5 hours. And he said, "I will to my dying day oppose with all the powers and faculties God has given me, all such instruments of slavery on the one hand and villainy on the other, as this writ of assistance is." He declared that a man's house is his castle. So he based his arguments on England's constitutional principles and its Bill of Rights. He was like, why should we be any different? He lost the case, but no one would forget his words. He got the attention of all who were in the State House. You would think they would have been napping by 4.5 hours, but they were apparently very intrigued with this young man. During the presentation, a 25-year-old up-and-coming lawyer named John Adams was in the audience, in the hall, and he was busy taking notes. And this is a quote of his: "Otis was a flame of fire with a prophetic glance of his eyes into futurity, and a rapid torrent of impetuous eloquence. Every man of an immense crowded audience appeared to me to go away as I did, ready to take arms against the writs of assistance. Then and there was the first scene of the first act of the opposition to the arbitrary claims of Great Britain. Then and there," this is still his quote, "the child independence was born." Am I loud enough, by the way, for the back? Okay. I was a teacher. James was elected to the, well, wait a minute. Oh, I guess why did I put him in again? I guess I just like him. There's Crocker Tavern. So that's where, after that big moment in 1774, that was where he went. And he went there because that was a site for the people who were against the rule of Britain and what they were doing, particularly the writs of assistance. And then where the Baptist Church is now, this is all in Barnstable Village on 6A, do you all know this building? When a few doors down to the west was the Loyalists Tavern.
Sturgis Tavern.
Yes. And there's a woman, I did a book on women of Barnstable, and it's over there. There was a woman who insisted still on selling tea from England, and the people here were furious at her. And she went by the Liberty Tree on the big green, and the big green now is about this big, and it's got tarmac everywhere else, but it used to be a big green in a militia training field. She went by this and said, oh, that tree should, we should burn that down, we should get rid of it. So then our people who wanted to be independent and did become eventually Americans, having our own country, they took her, two men took her out of her bed in the middle of the night and tarred and feathered. Yeah.
Wow,
So
really?
it shows everything isn't black and white, even our side can do something very nice. So he was elected, James Jr. was elected to the Massachusetts House of Representatives in 1765, where he would be elected Speaker of the House. But the British rule denied his being able to do that. So he's getting madder and madder. I must say too, James was a very emotional person, very easily charged up with energy and anger, and yet also very intelligent, but just something to remember. The colonies were getting more and more incensed at the actions of the British rule. James joined Samuel Adams in founding the Sons of Liberty, and that year, as a reaction to the Stamp Act, which I described to you all, and I even describe it here, as it was every paper good: newspapers, wills, deeds, contracts, college diplomas, even playing cards. Can you imagine? Every single card had to have a stamp on it. The Sons of Liberty met secretly in homes and taverns, and particularly in Crocker Tavern. Even the Adams family was in Crocker Tavern at one time. A year later, they disbanded when the Stamp Act was rescinded, but the fervor of revolt had entered the minds of many. The name Sons of Liberty would go on for many years with future separatists. So James Otis Jr., not as good a picture, had a quote: "The colonists are, by the law of nature, freeborn, as indeed all men are, white or black." And I put in parentheses, sorry, no mention of women. James was always known for his intelligence and his fight for justice, but he was also known for his, as I've just said, inability to control his emotions, and often his temper. On September, and I think I can go to one more picture. Nope. You didn't see that. On September 5th, 1769, Otis entered a British coffee house in Boston, and he encountered John Robinson, who was a customs commissioner for the King of England, and a proponent of Britain's taxation policies. There were words between the two men. Robinson rushed up to Otis, grabbed him by the nose, and with a cane, and apparently it was a really big, solid, hit him many times, and probably frontal lobe injury was the result. And he was never the same again. He battled his illness, his injuries for the rest of his life, and he would never again be a brilliant speaker for the colony's independence. He was declared non-compos mentis in 1772, so this is before things would finally happen. His family and friends took turns taking care of him, and he spent much of his life in West Barnstable. And by the way, their house in West Barnstable is gone. The next building that was built on there, both those two different buildings, different periods apart, were prey to fires. But it's right across from the post office in West Barnstable, and you'll see a plaque coming up soon. So he stayed with his father until his father got too old, and again, his father is Colonel Otis. James. And then finally he became a ward of the state. And if we have time, I have a really neat story to tell you about James. He did actually have, he would stay with his brother Samuel, he would stay with his father, his sister would come down to help because she was in Plymouth, and you're going to hear more about her. But he also stayed for a while in Hull and met a young lady, and it's a good thing. So I'll tell you about that later. He often said that he hoped he would be taken from Earth by a bolt of lightning. And on May 23rd, 1783, he was standing in the kitchen door of a home in Andover when he was struck by lightning and died instantly. Pretty weird, huh? Yeah. He's buried. He's buried at the Granary Burial Ground, which is on Tremont Street in Boston. I was told this graveyard had more heroic people in the construction of our country than any other graveyard in the country. So, you have to look up who else is here.
Crispus Attucks.
Huh?
Crispus Attucks is buried there.
Oh.
From the Boston Massacre. Who else? Benjamin Franklin's parents are buried.
Yes, yes. So, the plaque marks, and then the next plaque to show you, that's right across the street from the post office of West Barnstable and Cooperative Cooperative Bank of Cape Cod. So you can look for it just as you're coming out of the parking lot. So it's all, nothing, the only thing that's left is a baluster from the main stairway in their house, way back, and the fire was in the later 1700s. And Barnstable Historical Society has that one baluster. And there may be other things, but that's the only thing I know of that was left from that house. It's kind of interesting. So now we're going to talk about the second Otis. This is by John Singleton Copley. It's at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, as are her parents, James and his wife Mary. Those paintings are all there. This Otis is the one who contributed to the Bill of Rights. It was James Jr.'s sister, Mercy. So, she was the third child of James and Mary. She was a natural student, like her brother James. So there was James, and then Joseph, and then Mercy, and then there were the other 4 kids. Get my math right. She just loved reading and learning about things. Her brother James, and she called him Jemmy. So if I mention Jemmy, that's James Otis Jr. Would return from schooling with Reverend Russell, as you heard before, and he had to answer to her unending questions of what the lessons were that day. At her brother's urging, her father finally consented to let her go off with her 2 brothers. And this was, think of the post office in West Barnstable, that's where they were. And they went down a road that's Navigation Road, not Navigation, Hinckley Lane. It's no longer, it still is a road on our maps, have you noticed that? But it's now just taken over by nature. But they would walk down that and Church Street and over to the meeting house, 1772 meeting house. So, let's see, where was I? So she ended up getting a classical education, which was Greek, Roman literature, poetry, drama, philosophy, art, and history. And I think it's likely she was the first woman on Cape Cod to receive such an education. She was very close to her brother. They shared opinions and values, and she too became angry at Britain and what they were doing with their extreme control and taxation of the colonies, and was always blaming the British Parliament and King George III. I don't think I'd put him up here again. No, sorry, I should have. So this is her, a drawing, and then also James. So she ended up marrying Major General James Warren of Plymouth in 1754. He had gone to Harvard, was a couple of years younger than her brother James, and they then met when James and her husband James, I hope you're all taking notes, they became good friends. They both moved to Plymouth, these 2 Jameses, and then James Warren would come down to the Otis house on weekends or whatever. So they ended up getting married, and they had 5 children, 5 boys. That's him. That's the husband. He comes from a long family of interesting people too, Warren family. So their house on, oh yeah, first I'll do this part. They were definitely a couple that fit. They were very in love with each other. They sent letters back and forth, and luckily she saved most of her writing and much of his. Unfortunately, James Otis Jr., as he was getting close to leaving Earth, burned most of his writings, most of his paperwork. Think of what we would have if we still had them. But smallpox was around during this time, and I'd almost really kind of like to read a little of that for you. Introduced to North America in the 16th century by Spanish conquistadors, it flourished with every war, and by 1775 it was a full-scale epidemic. They estimate that 130,000 North Americans, most of them Indians, were killed by smallpox during the Revolution. So there's an interesting story in this. I'm going to show you all these books and tell you which ones I like and why. I mean, I think they're all interesting, but in this book by Nancy Rubin Stewart, who I got to know because she came up from New York to find out where Mercy had lived, and we're pretty close friends now. What was I getting at with? Okay, yeah, I got it now, sorry. She went up with her husband, and so many people did this. If they were of a higher economic level and could afford to do this, they went up to Boston to a medical, but governmental, maybe a Navy hospital, something like that, and they would get their skin pierced and fluids from someone who had smallpox. It was the first form, sort of, that we know of vaccines. And they did that because they had 5 boys, and they thought, if my boys get it, and they're likely to get it, they wouldn't be well enough, because they would have it too, and they wouldn't be well enough to take care of the boys. So interesting, and wonderful letters, really interesting.
George Washington make all his people get vaccinations?
Did what?
George Washington,
So-
I think he gave a lot of it the troops.
I bet he did.
Smallpox
Yeah,
vaccination.
yeah. And then the boys got it, got the vaccinations, but they did it in segments to make sure everybody was okay. Interesting time. So there's Mercy again. Where was I? So so she was living up in Plymouth because she married James Warren of Plymouth in 1754, and their house is still there. Their 2 houses that they lived in the 1700s are still there, which is really wonderful. So their house on Main Street became a meeting house, just like the Crocker Tavern had for the Patriots. And Sam Adams, John Adams were frequent members of the group in the mid-1760s. She developed a close friendship with Abigail Adams, and the Warrens were friendly with the Adams in general. There was a 7-year time of some problems, but basically they were good friends. She participated in the conversations that were going on at their house with the Patriots and broadcast their concerns in her poetry, plays, and submissions to Boston newspapers, always under a man's name, of course. Her scathing dramatizations of Boston's Loyalist Party members had a strong influence on a growing public sentiment against Governor Hutchinson. That's Governor Hutchinson, not to be confused with George. The story, I mean, this is so just touching the surface because there's so many deep stories that you could get into in every one of these sections. And the Brits were furious because they were losing a lot of money by not having the Stamp Act work as it was supposed to. And they were still dealing with a national debt from the French and Indian War, which was 1754 to 63. Long war. Then came the day, September 5th, 1769, when her brother entered the Boston British coffee house that we talked about before in his section, and had that run-in with John Robinson, which left him with that severe head injury. She took up Jemmy's cause with a passion. And she fought harder than ever against British rule. She used her talents as a playwright, author, journalist, poet, and patriot. Her play, The Group, was published in the Boston Gazette in 1775, and it has been described as one of the sparks of the American Revolution. In 1789, 2 years after the Constitution, there's Mercy and him again, she wrote, well, no, I shouldn't get into this one yet, sorry. Okay, look at that. And after the Constitution was signed, she wrote a 19-page political pamphlet detailing the omissions and limitations within the Constitution. And this is her quote: "There is no provision by a Bill of Rights to guard against the dangerous encroachments of power." Her suggestions, along with submissions by other authors, so there were many people who were involved in this, which resulted in the Bill of Rights. So she is one of the authors of the Bill of Rights. In 1790, she published a collection of poems and plays, and it would be her first publication where she used her real name, not using the fictitious male names that had been necessary before. She received praise from George Washington, John Adams, Alexander Hamilton, and Alexander Hamilton wrote, "In the career of dramatic composition, at least female genius in the United States has outstripped the male." She wrote, and this is what the next picture I was going to show. She wrote a 3-volume history of the rise, progress, and termination of the American Revolution. It was published in 1805. She was writing it starting in the 1790s. It was one of the first histories of the Revolution and was the first history book written by a woman in the United States. She left this earth on October 19th, 1814 at the age of 86. The 5 children, I didn't get into all that, but 2 of them she lost during her life, and some tough things she had been through. But she and her husband were always very much together. He had died a few years earlier. More than 200 years after her death, she's finally received recognition of her accomplishments with a statue. I'm supposed to say sculpture. He is a sculptor. By sculptor David Lewis. And this is, I should back up. Okay, this is in Plymouth. This is the burial grounds, burial grounds. It's on here. So that's right in the center of town, really. That's the major plaque. Behind it is her husband. You can see G-E-N, James Warren, and her name. Interesting to go to. I study gravestones. I can tell you who did that. Anyway. So this is David Lewis. He's a Barnstable sculptor, and he does the, he worked on the sculpting of the
Statues.
Statues.
You're right with that.
Okay.
Mhm.
And
We'll take an eye.
he also did the, Bob Frazie's my history buddy. As I say, it's our opium, right?
It
It's our
is.
thing.
It
It's
is.
just,
It is.
and
It's
then
illegal law.
he sculpted Mercy and her brother. They are sitting now on the hill, the lawn, right in front of our county courthouse. Beautiful. Then, also in Barnstable, there's a Mercy Otis Warren Award given out every spring. And that's, I think that's kind of a neat picture because that's the 1717 meeting house, which she went to as a young child. And also we had a play that the 2 founders of the Wheelock Family Theater up in Boston wrote this play. And that was done in 2017. And it was performed also in her church. I'm almost done. There are plans for a play at the Barnstable Comedy Club, probably next winter, that will include Mercy. So, while the town of Barnstable has honored her over the last 25 to 30 years, the town of Plymouth, not so much. But a group of Plymouth historians and Pilgrim Hall Museum have come together in the last year to celebrate Mercy. As they have said, you know, you think of Plymouth, everybody just thinks of the Pilgrims and Plymouth Rock, and you know, she and her husband James were very, very much a part of why we are here today. So they had an event for her. The gentleman on the left brought original copies of the 3-volume history of the American Revolution and was displaying it for all of us. Now, can you guess which one was Mercy? I think you can. Yeah. So, and so Mercy is standing next, her name is Gabrielle? Who was saying that?
Michelle Gabriel's son.
Gabrielle's son is her last
Gabriel's
name, okay. And this is Nancy Reuben Stewart, who wrote that book, The Muse of the American Revolution. And that was John Adams. Not, the last guy, not him, but the guy with the white hair. So that was a great event. And what's also interesting about Mercy is she and James's house is still there. 2 houses are still there. This is on the corner of, I say it's,
Court.
you say Court, but it's right where Court and Main come together, and North Street. It's on that corner. This is what it looks like now. There's a pizza joint in the one side, and you could go, oh, that's terrible. But the man there and his 14-year-old son are so into history and so appreciative of being in that building. But that's what it was like before. It was the home of General John Winslow first, and then James Warren and Mercy. So, let's see where else. Mercy also had another house, and Mercy and James, and that was just south of the center of Plymouth, very near the water, and that's still there today.
Eel River?
Hmm?
Near the
Eel River Road. Yep. So,
They're both Gambrel Roads.
pardon?
They're both Gambrel Roads.
Yeah. Another book we're working on.
Just wanted to point that out.
And actually, the house in town was the house where she wrote her satirical plays and her 3-volume history of the American Revolution. A little more about 2 other members of the Otis family. Joseph Otis, so it was James, and then Joseph, and then Mercy. He, again, brother of them, he had intense battles with Barnstable's Edward Bacon, who was an opponent of the American Revolution. In 1789, President Washington appointed, though, General James Joseph Otis of West Barnstable to be the first customs collector for our district, the port of Barnstable, and he served there until 1810. And then the youngest son of the Otis family, Samuel Allen Otis, he was the first secretary of the U.S. Senate. He held a Bible for Washington during his inauguration. His son, Harrison Gray Otis, was the president of the state senate and later was a U.S. senator from Massachusetts and then was mayor of Boston. So quite the family. The last page, if you can stand it. All right. Going back to James. So James is really, just not with it. He's in this sort of housing for the needy. He's in a home owned by a Captain Daniel Souther in Hull. And there's a beautiful story that happens here. There's a 10-year-old little girl in the neighborhood. Her name was Susanna Haswell. And they befriended each other. She had such an interest in writing and history, and it reminded him of his sister. So you could think at first, oh, was something going to happen, but it was a lovely situation. He ended up giving her a classic education as her sister had finally gotten. And she ended up being the first woman geographer. She was an author of a textbook, Rawlings' Abridgment of the Universal Geography in 1805. She was a vocal supporter of female education and wrote against slavery. And she was the author of the 1791 novel, Charlotte Temple. And that was the best-selling novel in America until Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin. Uncle Tom's Cabin. So, I'll shut up.
That's awesome.
Questions or? Oh, can I show you the books?
Yeah.
Just to suggest which ones you might like. Whoops. They're all good for their own different reasons. This book, you can turn that off, or you want to photograph it. Didn't get my photograph. This one is about the Otis family, and it's a good book for all the men in the Otis family. But interesting enough, I bought this 20 years ago, and there was hardly anything. I mean, like maybe 6 places that she was mentioned in a paragraph here and there of Mercy. So it's a good book, though, because it's very good about the rest of the family. This was an earlier book, Rosemary Zagari, one of the earlier books, and good, but I must say these two are my favorites. And they're both authors who have written, when did she write hers? I'm going to say 2010, something like that. And Jeff Hacker lives down south, and he came up and I showed him around West Barnstable. He wrote this about 4 years ago. The difference is she really wrote about the American Revolution and very detailed. He is also as detailed, but he got into the relationship between the brother and sister. So it's a very interesting book. A lot of good stories going on. This book, if you want to just have something smaller to read and get a quick sense of what she did in her life, I love this book. It was, I think, meant for children to read, but I guess, I'm only 12, so really do like that book. And this one was written by James Jenkins, not the James Jenkins you might know from the fire department, but James Jenkins is an author. He's done a lot of other things earlier in his life. And he has things about Mercy and about James, two chapters, 2 sections. And then I put her in the Mercy Otis Warren, the Women of Barnstable book, which I did with James Gould. And I think she's the only one who got 2 pages. Because we have 205 people in here. And as James was starting to leave our earth, and we were working together for 2 years on this thing, and I said, can I put so-and-so in? And they were alive, and he's like, Nancy, they have to be dead. And he was right. I mean, when do you cut it off? So anyway. Cokie Roberts even included Mercy in her book about founding mothers. And this is a book on women of colonial and revolutionary times. So take a look. But questions or anything else?
Were there any consequences to the man who beat James? For
The Robinson.
Robinson? Did he have to
I
pay a
don't know.
fine,
I
or-
was going to say, I think not. I know not. Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah.
Pure assault, just
Yeah.
nothing.
Yeah. Other questions? Yes.
Was the Warren that she was married to related to Dr. Warren, who was his
Yes, but not like it wasn't his direct uncle. Paul, do you remember? Because I think you
It
talked
was
about
distant relatives,
that. Yeah,
distant.
yeah. Maybe a 4th cousin or 3rd cousin or something. We all know of Dr. Warren on Bunker Hill. Other questions?
Are any of the buildings that were affiliated with their lives still accessible for visitors?
Well, you can go to the pizza joint.
So, I was going for the more elegant one. Isn't the James Warren, Otis Warren homestead in Boston, isn't that owned by Historic New England, and isn't it their headquarters?
Yes, it is. That's
So-
up towards a little north of
Yeah,
the
I don't
Commons,
know
yeah.
that it's open every
Yeah.
day because
Yeah.
it's
It's right
a
next
business
to
building.
Congress
Mass
Street.
General.
That sounds right.
Congress Street.
Okay.
It's a pretty elegant place.
Yeah, then also the house that's on Eel River Road, it's a private home, but you can certainly drive by it. But down here in Barnstable, you can go in the building that had the judge presiding over the courthouse, which is now Tales of Cape Cod. And those people, the Otises, were in that building often, a lot. And also the 1717 Meeting House in West Barnstable. So
Maybe you
I
can
know
rent a
of
room for a week.
4
at the-
buildings anyway.
Rent a room for a week at the Crocker Tavern too.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's actively possible.
Actually, no,
No?
because this is the couple that
Yeah.
is joining Barnstable Historical. They're so into history. It's really lovely, and they're living there. And I don't know if they're going to maybe rent it once in a while, weekly, but they're not. They used to rent it out for a week.
Right.
People would have weddings there and things. And at the moment, I don't know details,
That's okay.
and I don't think they're quite sure what they're going to do yet.
That's fair.
But they're living there now. And Sturgis Library, boy, if you have any other questions or whatever, Sturgis Library is the best source. I know that man. I was in the Coast Guard with him. Yes.
Is Otis Air Force Base named after this family?
No. it's named after someone in Kansas or something. Now, are they related somewhere along the line? Probably, but not directly. Yeah.
Was there regular coach service from this part of
Is there
Cape
what?
Cod? Was there regular coach service, or did these guys have to get on horseback and spend a
There
day
was,
just to
and
get up to
there was-
Boston?
One time when the Otises took a boat, a ship up, and it was like the mail packets and things.
Yeah.
But also, what was I going to get at?
Just asking how they got there.
The trips back and forth to Boston. There was one that started somewhere to the east. It ended up picking up. It was the coach, and it was going up to Boston. Think of it: no roads, dirt. You know, I mean, a tough time, tough place. Oh, I have a picture here to show you, but
The Rye Tavern.
yeah, I don't have a picture of that, but I'm going to show them that. But that's the books. There's books. This is Old Sandwich Road. I can't tell you how much in love I am with this place. But just to finish the traveling, the coach would stop in Barnstable at 3 in the morning to pick people up. And can you imagine, I mean, I hope they had cushions for their rear ends, right? Because I'm sure it was awful. But this road is still there, and that's what it looks like today. And if you go to, it used to be exit 3 on Route 3. Well,
Pine Hill.
Pine Hills is there, yeah, and you go east, go past Pine Hills kind of, although this is actually part of Pine Hills now, and take a left onto Old Sandwich Road. And you can't look too far to the north, and to the, left and right, because you'll see golf course screens. So, but it still has a look of, it's like a time travel. And that's on the way eventually up to Mercy's house that was in the southern part. So the old river was up there.
The Rye Taverns.
And Rye
What
Tavern.
year is that? 1710.
Yeah.
It's
That's
a
up,
restaurant.
just up the road a piece and on the left. Yeah.
Oh, still operating?
Yeah, Rye
Yeah.
Tavern.
Oh yeah.
right.
1790. Yeah. And I guess that's it. Oh, that was just the man whose relative was from Connecticut, and I showed you the genealogy. So that's. So that's it. Now you can drink.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Nancy.
Good luck.